October 4th. Our boat returned this morning, but the landing place being far from the inhabitable part of St. Antonio, they brought nothing but a few limes and fowls, and left our linguist behind to get what we wanted. We struck 2 of our gun room guns into the hold, being useless in their place, and the ship having too much top weight and not very stiff. We had plenty of fish here, but not very good. Winds at north-northeast. October 5th, our boat went to St. Antonio to see for our linguist, according to appointment. We heeled and cleaned our ships, and got a great deal of wood and water aboard. Wind at northeast, fine weather. October 6th, our boat returned with nothing but limes and tobacco, and no news of our linguist. But soon after there came another boat belonging to that part of the island where the governor lives, with his deputy governor, a negro, who brought limes, tobacco, oranges, fowls, potatoes, hogs, bananas, musks and watermelons, and brandy, which we bought of him, and paid in such cheap prize goods as we had left of the bark's cargo cheap enough. They are poor people, and will truck at any price for what they want, in such payments as they can make. October 7th. We sent our boat at 3 this morning to see if our linguist was returned. The deputy governor told us he promised him to wait at the waterside all that night where we put him ashore, and that there were cattle for us if we would fetch 'em. We were ready to sail, a good wind at northeast and a fresh gale. October 8th. Our boat returned yesterday in the afternoon with 2 good black cattle, 1 for each ship, but no news of our linguist. Upon which we consulted with the officers of both ships, and all unanimously agreed that we had better leave him behind, than to wait with 2 ships for 1 man that had not followed his orders. We held a committee on board the Dutchess to prevent embezzlements in prizes, and to hinder feuds and disorders amongst our officers and men for the future, because the small prize had shewed us, that without a method to be strictly observed in plunder, it might occasion the worst of consequences to both ships, and such quarrels as would not easily be laid. So with the consent and approbation of the officers appointed for a committee, we unanimously agreed on it, to prevent those mutinies and disorders amongst the men of both ships, who were not yet reconciled since the taking the small Canary prize. They all insisted there was never any privateer's crew hindered from plunder, so that we were forced to agree on the following instrument of a dividend, when we should meet with any prize. And that the things we deemed to be plunder, according to custom in privateering, should tend as little as possible to the disadvantage of the owners, we did for that end take care by the 2nd Article in the said instrument and agreement with the men, to reserve the power of adjudging what should be deemed plunder unto the superior officers and agents exclusive of the crew, &c. For we found it would be next to a miracle to keep the men in both ships under command, and willing to fight resolutely on occasion, if we held them to the letter of agreement with the owners, which was not duly considered of at home. We had a particular regard, however, to the sentiments of the owners, delivered on this head in discourses at several times with divers of the committee, as myself, Captain Dover, Captain Courtney, Mr. Robert Frye, and Mr. Carleton Vanbrugh, and particularly in King Road to the men, at the time of signing of their instrument. By all which we judged that the owners could not but approve of the measures that we took on this occasion, and that the good effects of 'em would abundantly answer our intentions. Although the officers and men did voluntarily allow Captain Courtney and me 5% each out of the value of all plunder, it was much less than our due, and we would have been glad to have let all alone, provided we could with the advice of our chief officers in both ships have contrived any other method to be safe in the prosecution of our designs with our men, and have kept them to their duty on all occasions, at so great a distance from home. Without their being easy, we must unavoidably have run into such continual scenes of mischief and disorder as have not only tended to the great hindrance, but generally to the total disappointment of all voyages of this nature that have been attempted so far abroad in the memory of man. The agreement we made was as follows. At a committee held on board the Dutchess the 8th of October, 1708, it is agreed by the officers and men of both ships to the sundry particulars following. Impressed, that all plunder on board each prize we take by either ship shall be equally divided between the company of both ships according to each man's respective whole share, as shipped by the owners or their orders. 2. That what is plunder shall be adjudged by the superior officers and agents in each ship. 3. that if any person on board either ship do conceal any plunder exceeding 1 piece of 8 in value, 24 hours after the capture of any prize, he shall be severely punished and lose his shares of the plunder. The same penalty to be inflicted for being drunk in time of action, or disobeying his superior officer's commands, or concealing himself, or deserting his post in sea or land service, except when any prize is taken by storm in boarding, then whatsoever is taken shall be his own, as followeth: a sailor or landman, 10 pounds; any officer below the carpenter, 20 pounds; a mate, gunner, boatswain, and carpenter, 40 pounds; a lieutenant or master, 70 pounds; and the captains 100 pounds over and above the gratuity promised by the owners to such as shall signalize themselves. 4. That public books of plunder are to be kept in each ship attested by the officers, and the plunder to be appraised by officers chosen and divided as soon as possible after the capture. Also every person to be sworn and searched so soon as they shall come aboard, by such persons as shall be appointed for that purpose. The person or persons refusing shall forfeit their shares of the plunder as above. 5. In consideration that Captain Rogers and Captain Courtney, to make both ships' companies easy, have given the whole cabin plunder, which in all probability is the major part, to be divided as aforesaid, we do voluntarily agree that they shall have 5 per cent each of 'em over and above their respective shares, as a consideration for what is their due of the plunder aforesaid. 6. That a reward of 20 pieces of 8 shall be given to him that first sees a prize of good value, or exceeding 50 tons in burden. 7. That such of us who have not signed already to the articles of agreement indented with the owners, do hereby oblige ourselves to the same terms and conditions as the rest of the ship's company have done, half shares and half wages, etc. To which articles of agreement we have set our hands as our full intent and meaning, without any compulsion. Signed by the officers and men of both ships. October 8th. At 7 in the evening, after having put the deputy governor ashore, where he must lie in a hole of the rocks, there being no house on that part of the island, we came to sail. Our consort got before us, and lay with a light for us. There were several negroes on the island, that came from St. Nicholas and St. Antonio to make oil of turtle, there being very good green turtle at this time of the year, which I sometimes gave our men to eat. They have likewise wild goats, but in no great plenty, wild asses, guinea hens, and curlews, and abundance of sea fowls. Captain Dampier and others aboard each ship that had formerly stopped at St. Jago, another of these Cape de Verde Islands, told us that though this island is not often frequented by ships, yet it is preferable to St. Jago for stopping outward, because 'tis a much better road for ships, and more convenient for water and wood, and has better landing. The island is mountainous and barren, the plainest part lies against this sandy bay where we rode. The wood that grows in it is short, and for no use but firing. They have very large spiders here, which weave their webs so strong betwixt the trees, that 'tis difficult to get through 'em. Where we watered, there's a little stream that flows down the hill from a spring, and is very good, but in other parts 'tis brackish. This island was formerly inhabited and had a governor, but is now only frequented in the season for catching tortoises by the inhabitants of the other islands, who are for the most part negroes and mulattoes, and very poor. The stock of wild goats in this island is almost destroyed by the people of St. Nicholas and St. Antonio. The heats are excessive to us who came newly from Europe, so that several of our men began to be sick, and were blooded. Some of our officers that went ashore a hunting could meet no game but a wild ass, which after a long chase they got within shot and wounded, yet he afterwards held out so as to tire them, and they returned weary and empty handed. These islands are so well known that I need not say much of 'em. They are 10 in number, of which St. Jago, St. Nicholas, Bonaviste, St. Ontario, Bravamayo, and Fuego are inhabited. The latter is so named from a volcano. St. Jago is much the largest and best, and the seat of the chief governor. It produces a small matter of indigo, sugar, and tobacco, which, with their goat skins and others, they send to Lisbon. The capital is of the same name, and the see of a bishop. There is also a town called Ribera Grande, which is said to consist of 500 houses, and has a good harbor towards the west. The air of this island is not very wholesome, and the soil uneven. Their valleys produce some corn and wine. Their goats are fat and good meat, and the she ones are said to bring 3 or 4 kids at a time once in 4 months. St. Nicholas is the best peopled next to St. Jago. The island Mayo has a great deal of salt naturally made by the sun from the sea water, which is left from time to time in pits on shore. It's known they load many ships with that commodity in a year, and are able to furnish some thousands had they vent for it. The fine Marroquin leather is made of their goat skins. The other inhabited islands afford more or less of provisions. They have their name from Cape Verde on the African coast, from whence they lie about 160 leagues to the westward. The Portuguese settled here in 1572. We had very hot weather here. On the 8th, a brisk gale at east-northeast. At 9 last night, St. Antonio's bore northwest by north, distance 3 leagues, from whence we took our departure for the Isle of Grande in Brazil. October 9th, fair weather, brisk gale of wind at northeast. We saw abundance of flying fish. At 12 o'clock, being near the latitude 14 north, we hailed up southeast by south to get well to the eastward, expecting as usual to meet with southerly winds when near the equinoctial. Had an observed latitude 12°53. October 10th, fair weather, moderate gales of wind at northeast by east. These 24 hours we met with several great ripplings as if a current, which had it been calm we would have tried. October 11th, wind and weather as before till 7 last night, when we had much lightning, followed by a hard shower of rain, and a calm ensued. Such weather is customary as we draw near the line. October 14th, cloudy weather, with moderate gales from the south-southwest to the southwest by west all last night, but this morning cloudy weather, with hard showers of rain. This day we put up the smith's forge, and he began to work on such things as we wanted. October 21st. Yesterday I dined on board Captain Courtney. Nothing remarkable happened since the 14th, but veerable winds and frequent showers of rain, with calms. We agreed with our consort, if possible, to stop at the island Trinidado, and not to water and refresh at Brazil for fear of our men deserting and losing our time. October 22nd, close cloudy weather all night, with squalls of rain. At 10 this morning it cleared up. Captain Courtney came aboard of us and sent back his boat for Captain Cook, with orders to bring Mr. Page, second mate, with him, to be in the room of Mr. Ballet, that we exchanged out of our ship. Page, disobeying command, occasioned Captain Cook, being the superior officer on board, to strike him, whereupon Page struck him again, and several blows passed. But at last Page was forced into the boat and brought on board of us. And Captain Cook and others telling us what mutiny had passed, we ordered Page on the forecastle into the bilboes. He begged to go into the head to ease himself. Under that pretence the corporal and the rest left him for a while, upon which he leapt overboard, thinking to swim back to the Dutchess, it being near calm, and the captains out of the ship. However, the boat being alongside, we soon overtook him and brought him on board again, for which and his abusive language he was lashed to the main gears and drubbed, and for inciting the men to mutiny was afterward confined in irons aboard the Duke. October 28th. At 5 last night we were on the equinoctial, and spied a sail about 4 leagues distant to windward, bearing south by east, and thinking she had not seen us, we lay by in her way from 6 o'clock till half an hour past 10, hoping to meet her if bound to the West Indies. But it growing dark, and she having, as we suppose, seen us before night, and altered her course, we saw no more of her. This day we began to read prayers in both ships mornings or evenings, as opportunity would permit, according to the Church of England, designing to continue it the term of the voyage. Cloudy weather, moderate gales at southeast by south. October 29th. This morning I let Mr. Page out of irons on his humble submission, and acknowledging his fault, with promises of amendment. Fair pleasant weather with a fresh gale. November 1st. This morning between 1 and 4 o'clock the sea seemed to be in a breach as far as we could see, being a moonlit night. The watch, being surprised, called me up, for they supposed it to be something extraordinary, and hove the lead, but finding no ground, were all easy, and afterwards believed that it was the spawn of fish floating on the water. Fair weather with moderate gales. November 2nd. This morning 2 persons being accused of concealing a peruke of the plunder in the Canary bark, 2 shirts and a pair of stockings, and being found guilty, I ordered them into the bilboes. After which they begged pardon, promised amendment, and were discharged. Pleasant weather and moderate gales of wind from east southeast to southeast by south. Had an observed latitude 750 south. November 4th. Yesterday about 4 in the afternoon we spoke with our Consort and agreed to bear away for the Island of Grande in Brazile, it being uncertain to fetch the Island of Trinidado. And besides, by the time we could get the length of it, being generally close weather, and the sun in the zenith, we might miss so small an island, which would prove a great loss of time to us. Close weather, with a fresh gale of wind at S.E. by E. November 13th. Nothing remarkable since the 4th. We have had the winds very veerable. Now we draw near the land, the wind veers to the northward, and often strong gales with hazy weather. About 11 last night we made a signal to our Consort, and both lay by, thinking ourselves to be near the land. This morning came on moderate weather, and we made sail again. Wind at north by east. November 14th. This morning at 5 we made the land of Brazile very plain, bearing northwest. We had several soundings on the sand called in the maps Bonfunda, from 28 to 50 fathom water, brown fair sand with grey stones amongst it. We had several showers of rain, with very little wind, from north-northeast to north by west, latitude 22·9 south. November 15th. At 10 o'clock last night we had a heavy tornado with lightning, which fell as if it had been liquid. While this storm held, which was not above an hour, we had all our sails furled, yet the ship lay along very much wind at southwest, but afterwards calm and little wind. The sun being near the zenith here at this time occasions such weather. As soon as day appeared, we saw the land bearing west about 7 leagues distance, a small breeze at north-northwest. We stood in with it, but could not be certain what land it was. We had sundry soundings from 40 to 50 fathom water, coarse sand. November 16th. Yesterday evening, having a brave breeze at east, we stood in with the land, and supposed it to be the island of Cape Frio. It makes the southernmost land of several other islands. It is high and uneven. This island appears in 2 hills to the southward. The least looks like a saddle, and appears at a distance like 2 islands, but as you draw near it, you see that it joins. November 17th. This morning, the weather being calm, our pinnace went ashore with Captain Dampier into a sandy bay about 2 leagues off. They brought aboard a large tortoise, which our people eat. The tortoises on this coast have a strong taste. Foggy weather and very little wind from the east to the southwest, sometimes calm. November 19th. Yesterday in the afternoon we came to an anchor in 22 fathom water. The east end of the large island, which we took to be Grande, bore west-southwest distant about 4 leagues, and there is a high woody point at the west end of the low sandy bay, which at last we run by, about 1.5 leagues from us. We sent our pinnace ashore well manned to this point, with Captain William Dampier, in order to be certain whether it was the entrance of Grande between the 2 lands. The boat returned about 10 o'clock at night, with a confirmation that it was the island of Grande, as we had supposed. So we immediately weighed with a small breeze, but it soon falling calm, we came to anchor again, then weighed with another small breeze, and rowed and towed, by the help of which at 12 o'clock we came to an anchor in the middle of the entrance of the island by Grande in 11 fathom water. The entrance goes in west by south, a remarkable white rock on the larboard side of the bay bore southeast about 1.5 miles. 'Tis a long entrance near 5 leagues from the place we anchored at. November 20th. Yesterday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon we sent our boats in, with a lieutenant in one boat and Captain Dampier in the other, to sound all the way to our watering place, and see if no enemy lay there. I borrowed the Dutchess' yawl, and kept her ahead sounding, but having a breeze against us, we got little ground. This morning at 4 we weighed again with the wind at northeast, and got both into the bay on the west side of the Isle of Grande, but could not reach the cove where we designed to water. Heavy showers of rain took us. At 11 we rowed and towed into the cove, where our Consort had been an hour before us. A Portuguese boat came from a small cove on our starboard side as we came in, and told us they had been robbed by the French not long before. November 21st. Yesterday afternoon it rained so hard that our men could not work. At 4 o'clock Captain Courtney put 8 of his men in irons for disobeying command, and knowing them to be ringleaders was willing to secure them whilst here, where they could run away. About 6 o'clock it began to clear up, and our pinnace with Captain Cook and Lieutenant Pope went to Angre de Reis, as it's called in sea drafts, but the Portuguese call it Nostra Senhora de la Concepcion, a small village about 3 leagues distant, to wait on the governor, and acquaint him with our arrival, with a present of butter and cheese to procure his friendship if any of our men should run away. The boat returned at 12 at night, and told us that when they came near the town it was almost dark, that the people suspecting they were French fired on them several times, but did no hurt, and when they came ashore begged their pardon. The friars invited them to the convent and told 'em they were often plundered by the French, or they should not have been so ready to fire at 'em. The Governor was gone to Rio Janeiro, a city about 12 leagues distant, but was expected back every day. This morning our men went in our boat to haul our fishing net, and caught some very good fish, much better than those at St. Vince. November 22. Yesterday afternoon we got our empty casks ashore, and sent our carpenter with the Portuguese to look out wood for trussel trees, our main and 4 trussel trees being both broke, but the weather proved so wet and sultry that we could do little or nothing. Here are abundance of graves of dead men, and the Portuguese tell us that 2 great French ships homeward bound from the South Seas, that water'd in this same place about 9 months before, had buried nearly half their men here. But God be thanked, ours are very healthy. At this place the French South Sea ships generally water both out and homewards. This morning we had several canoes from the town with limes, fowls, Indian corn, &c. to exchange for such things as we could spare. We treated 'em all very civilly, and offered a gratuity to such as would secure our men if any of 'em run away. They all promised to give us good information and assist us in searching after 'em. November 23. This was a fair pleasant day, but violent hot. We heel'd the Dutchess both sides by us, we had a great deal of wood cut, caught excellent fish with our lines, and had several canoes from the town, which inform'd us of a brigantine at an anchor in the entrance where we came in. I sent our pinnace mann'd and arm'd to know what she was, and found her a Portuguese laden with Negroes for the gold mines. Our boat return'd and brought a present, being a roove of fine sugar and a pot of sweet meats from the Master, who spoke a little English, and had formerly sail'd with them. The way that leads to these gold mines is not far from this place by water, but the Portuguese say they lie several days' journey up in the country, and some will tell you 'tis 10 or 15 days, others a month's travel from the town of Senetas, which is the Seaport, for they are cautious how they discover the truth. But there is certainly abundance of gold found in this country. They told us the French often surpris'd their boats, and that at one time when the French stay'd to water, which could not exceed a month, they took of gold above 1200 pounds weight, in boats from the mines bound to Rio Janeiro, because the way is not good by land. November 24. Yesterday in the afternoon we clean'd one side by the Dutchess, and this morning the other side, gave the ships great lists. And having men enough, whilst our ship was cleaning, we let the pinnace with Captain Dover, Mr. Vanbrugh, and others, go to take their pleasure, but to return by 12 o'clock, when we should want our boat. When they returned, they brought with them a monstrous creature which they had killed, having prickles or quills, like a hedgehog, with fur between them. And the head and tail resembled those of a monkey. It stunk intolerably, which the Portuguese told us was only the skin, that the meat of it is very delicious, and they often killed them for the table. But our men being not yet at very short allowance, none of 'em had stomach good enough to try the experiment, so that we were forced to throw it overboard to make a sweet ship. Soon after came several canoes with Portuguese in 'em, whom we treated very civilly. November 25. This day was fair, but very hot. We had 3 or 4 canoes aboard, one of which had 3 fathers belonging to the Franciscan convent at Angre de Reys. We had got a great deal of water and wood aboard, with new trussel trees fixed to the head of the foremast. November 26. Yesterday afternoon we rigg'd the foremast again, and got almost all our water on board. Last night one Michael Jones and James Brown, 2 Irish landmen, run into the woods thinking to get away from us, though 2 such sparks run away the 25th from the Dutchess, and in the night were so frightened with tigers, as they thought, but really by monkeys and baboons, that they ran into the water, hollowing to the ship till they were fetched aboard again. About 4 this morning the watch on the quarter deck spied a canoe, and called her to come on board, but they not answering and trying to get away, made us suspect they had either got our men that run away last evening, or were coming by agreement to fetch 'em off the island, which was uninhabited. We immediately sent the pinnace and yawl after 'em. The pinnace coming up near the canoe, fired to stay 'em, but to no purpose. At last they wounded one of the Indians that rowed the canoe. He that owned and steered her was a friar, and had a quantity of gold which he got at the mines, I suppose by his trade of confessing the ignorant. The friar had just ran the canoe ashore on the little island full of wood as our boats landed, and afterwards he told us he hid some gold there. A Portuguese that would not run away with the father, because he had no gold to hide, knew our people to be English, and called the father back. The man that was wounded could not move, and was brought by our men, with the father and several slaves that row'd the large canoe, on board our ship, where our surgeon dress'd the wounded Indian, who died in 2 hours time. I made the father as welcome as I could, but he was very uneasy at the loss of his gold and the death of his slave, and said he would seek for justice in Portugal or England. November 27. Yesterday in the afternoon the Dutchess weighed and towed out of the cove about a mile, and came to anchor to wait for us. Their boats returning to the cove to fetch what was left, they spied 2 men waiting under the side of a wood by the shore, for a Portuguese canoe to get 'em off, but our boats landed on each side of the point where they were not seen, found 'em to be the men that left us the evening before, and brought 'em to us. I order'd 'em both to be severely whipped and put in irons. This morning Captain Courtney and I, with most of our officers, except those which we left to do what little remained unfinished on board the ships, went in our boat to Grande, it being the day kept for the Conception of the Virgin Mary, and a high day of procession amongst these people. The Governor, Senhor Rafael de Silva Lagos, a Portuguese, received us very handsomely. He asked us if we would see the convent and procession. We told him our religion differ'd very much from his. He answer'd we were welcome to see it without partaking in the ceremony. We waited on him in a body, being 10 of us, with 2 trumpets and a hautboy, which he desired might play us to church, where our music did the office of an organ, but separate from the singing, which was by the fathers well perform'd. Our music played Hey Boys, Up Go We, and all manner of noisy paltry tunes. And after service our musicians, who were by that time more than half drunk, marched at the head of the company, next to them an old father and 2 friars carrying lamps of incense with the host. Next came the Virgin Mary on a bier carried on 4 men's shoulders, and dressed with flowers and wax candles, etc. After her came the Padre Guardian of the convent, and then about 40 priests, friars, etc. Next was the governor of the town, myself and Captain Courtney, with each of us a long wax candle lighted. Next followed the rest of our officers, the chief inhabitants, and junior priests, with every one a lighted wax candle. The ceremony held about 2 hours, after which we were splendidly entertained by the fathers of the convent, and then by the governor at the guard house, his habitation being 3 leagues off. It's to be noted, they kneeled at every crossway and turned, walked round the convent, and came in at another door, kneeling and paying their devotion to the image of the Virgin and her wax candles. They unanimously told us they expected nothing from us but our company, and they had no more but our music. The town consists of about 60 low houses built of mud, covered with palmetto leaves and meanly furnished. They told us they had been plundered by the French, or perhaps they hid their plate and other best movables, because they were in doubt whether we were friends or enemies. They have 2 churches and a Franciscan monastery tolerably decent, but not rich in ornaments. They have also a guard house where there are about 20 men, commanded by the governor, a lieutenant, and ensign. The monastery had some black cattle belonging to it, but the fathers would sell us none. The fish we saw on the road were sharks, so well known that I need not describe them. 2 pilot fishes, so called because they commonly attend the sharks, find out their prey for them, and are never devoured by them. 3 the sucking fish, so called because of a sucker about 2 inches long on the top of their heads, by the slime of which they stick so fast to sharks and other large fish that they are not easily pulled off. 4 parrot fish, so named because their mouths resemble the beak of a parrot. 5 a rock fish, which is very good and much like our cod. 6 silver fish in great plenty. 'Tis a deep-bodied bright fish from 12 to 18 inches long and very good meat, but there are so many sorts of good fish here that we can't describe 'em all. November 28. Yesterday in the afternoon we left Grande. When we got aboard, we found the main mast rigged, with everything ready. This morning we got our ship out by our consort, and the wind being out of the way, and but little, we went with our boat to the town to get liquors for the voyage, and bring the gentlemen of the town aboard our ships, where we treated 'em the best we could. They were very merry, and in their cups proposed the Pope's health to us, but we were quits with them by toasting that of the Archbishop of Canterbury. To keep up the humour, we also proposed William Penn's to them, and they liked the liquor so well that they refused neither. We made the governor and the fathers of the convent a handsome present of butter and cheese from both ships, in consideration of the small presents and yesterday's favours from 'em, and as a farther obligation on 'em to be careful of our letters, which we took this opportunity to deliver into their own hands. I shall say no more of our letters, but that they contained everything material since my coming out, with 2 postscripts wrote by Captain Dover and Captain Courtney to put it out of doubt amongst all those concerned, that we join'd heartily in prosecuting our long undertaking, and that our Officers behaved themselves to satisfaction, which may clear up some difficulties started amongst the Gentlemen at home before we sail'd, that were a great hindrance and discouragement to us in the beginning, because mismanagement and misunderstanding amongst the Officers never fail of ill effects to the Voyage, and of spoiling the Men, which is an irrecoverable loss. November 29. Yesterday in the afternoon our Yawl went to Town to get necessaries for our next long Voyage, because we were to run near 2000 Leagues before we could expect any recruit of Liquors, unless by extraordinary good fortune. In the evening it came on blowing with thick showers of rain, which prevented the Governor and the rest from going ashore that night. This morning the Governor and Company were carried ashore. At parting we saluted 'em with a huzza from each Ship, because we were not overstock'd with Powder. After which all the Officers of the Committee met on board the Dutchess, where we inquir'd into the true cause of the aforesaid Indian's death, and protested against Mr. Vanbrugh, who was the occasion, for commanding our Ship's Pinnace as he did, in chase of the Canoe unknown to me, and without my order. At the same time I desir'd to have the Committee's hands, if they approved what I transacted since my leaving the Canary Islands, which they very readily sign'd, and also the protest against Mr. Vanbrugh's unadvised management. For I was sensible that good order and discipline in privateers was the only method to support myself and the other Officers, and keep up our authority, which is so essential towards acting with success and vigour on all occasions. This made it highly necessary in the infancy of our undertaking to prevent innovations in command, which inevitably confound the most promising designs. Therefore I thought it a fit time now to resent ignorant and wilful actions publicly, and to shew the vanity and mischief of them, rather than to delay or excuse such proceedings, which would have made the distemper too prevalent, and brought all to remediless confusion, had we indulged conceited persons with a liberty of hazarding the fairest opportunities of success. The above mentioned resolves of the Committee follow. At a Committee held on board the Dutchess, riding at the Island Grande on the coast of Brazil, by request of Captain Thomas Dover, President, Captain Woodes Rogers, and Captain Stephen Courtney, 29th November, 1708. We have examined and do approve of all the proceedings and transactions since our being at the Canary Islands, both as to the punishing of offenders and acting in all cases for the best of our intended voyage, and that we found it actually necessary to sell part of the goods taken in the prize amongst the Canary Islands here, to purchase some liquor and other necessaries for our men as they go about Cape Horn, they being very meanly clothed and ill provided to endure the cold, and we have and do hereby desire the Agent of each Ship to take particular cognizance of what such goods are sold and disposed of for, and agree that all possible dispatch hath been made both here and at St. Vincent. In acknowledgment of which we have set our hands the day and year above written. Thomas Dover, President, Woodes Rogers, Stephen Courtney, William Dampier, Edward Cook, Robert Fry, Carleton Vanbrugh, William Stratton, William Bath, Charles Pope, John Rogers, John Connolly, George Milburn, John Ballet. Memorandum, that on the 26th day of November, 1708, a little before break of day, a canoe coming near the ship Duke as she rode at anchor at the Island of Grande on the coast of Brazil, they hailed her, she not answering, they fired at her, upon which she rowed away, and the captain ordered the boat to get ready and pursue her. And Mr. Carleton Vanbrugh, agent of the said ship, putting off the boat without the order of his captain, or before any commanding officer was in pursuit of her, fired, or ordered to be fired, at her several muskets at a distance, but coming nearer he ordered the men to fire into the boat, and the corporal firing, as we have reason to believe, killed an Indian, and took the canoe and sent her away with 2 of the Duke's men, the corporal and a padre, and afterwards brought the rest of the people in the ship's pinnace. Since which time we are informed by the padre, master of the dead Indian, that he lost a quantity of gold to the value of 200 which he says he carried ashore, and hid in hopes to preserve, he taking them for Frenchmen by their firing and chasing, which could not afterwards be found, although he says, he does verily believe it was not taken by any of the ship's people, but alleges it was lost by means of their chasing and surprising him. Whatever damages may arise from the above mentioned action on account of killing the Indian or loss of gold that the Padre says he has lost, we the commanders and officers of ship Duke and Dutchess consorts do in behalf of ourselves and the rest of the ship's company protest against the unadvised actions of the aforesaid Mr. Carleton Vanbrugh for proceeding without any order from the captain of same ship and acting contrary to what he was shipped for. In witness whereof we have set our hands the 29th day of November 1708. Thomas Dover President, Woodes Rogers, Stephen Courtney, William Dampier, Edward Cook, Robert Fry, Charles Pope, William Stratton, William Bath, John Rogers, Thomas Glendall, John Connolly, George Milburn, John Ballet. November 30th. The wind continuing out of the way, last night we held a committee on board Dutchess and agreed to remove Mr. Carleton Vanbrugh from the ship Duke, which agreement is as follows. Memorandum, this 30th of November, 1708, we, the underwritten officers belonging to the ships Duke and Dutchess, appointed as a committee by the owners of both ships, do find it necessary for the good of our intended voyage to remove Mr. Carleton Vanbrugh from being agent of the Duke frigate to be agent of the Dutchess, and to receive Mr. William Bath, agent of the Dutchess, in his place. This is our opinion and desire, in acknowledgment of which we have hereunto set our hands in the port of the island of Grande on the coast of Brazil, the day above written. Thomas Dover President, Woodes Rogers, Stephen Courtney, William Dampier, Edward Cook, Robert Fry, Charles Pope, Thomas Glendall, John Bridge. November 30th. About 10 this morning we both weighed in order to go out on the other side of the Grande, which I think is the fairest outlet, though they are both very large, bold, and good. We went out east-southeast, the wind at northeast, and in 2 hours came to an anchor again, it proving calm and a current against us. December 1st. Yesterday at 2 in the afternoon we weighed again with a breeze at northeast, but at 5 a gale came up at south-southwest and blew very strong with rain, insomuch that we were forced to bear away and come to an anchor close under the island of Grande in 14 fathom water. It rained hard all night, but towards morning little wind. About 10 this morning we weighed anchor and steered away southwest. At 12 it was calm and we anchored again. Just before we anchored we spied a small vessel close under the shore near the west end of Grande. We sent our boat to examine her and found it to be the same brigantine our boats were aboard of 6 days before, and from whence I had the present. I gave the master an half hour glass, and other small things of little value, for which he was very thankful. December 2nd, I wrote a long letter to my owners, which Captain Dover and Captain Courtney also underwrote, and gave it to the master of this brigantine, who promised to forward it by the first conveyance for Portugal, so that now I had sent by 4 conveyances. At 10 this morning we sailed, wind at west-northwest, rowed and towed till 12, and came to an anchor to the southward of Grande, our men continuing healthy. December 3rd. Yesterday in the afternoon we sailed with a brisk gale of wind at east by north. At 6 o'clock in the evening the southwest point of Grande bore west-northwest, distant 5 leagues. The small 3-hummock island without Grande, which is seen as you go in both ways to it, bore northeast half north, distant 5 leagues. The westernmost point of the main bore west by south, distant 9 leagues, from whence we departed for the island of Juan Fernandez. The rest of these 24 hours a good gale from east by north to the east-southeast. This I observed when we came from Cape Frio to Grande, more than I have yet noted. About 13 leagues to the eastward of the Isle of Grande is a high, round rock, a good league without the island, as it appeared to us. Within it is high mountainous land, which we are informed is the entrance to Rio Janeiro. And as we came to the westward, we opened a sandy bay with low sandy land in the middle, and high land on each side clear to the points. It's about 3 leagues over and deep. Next to this bay, as we came to the westward, opened another low sandy bay, not quite so deep, but above twice as wide. The westernmost point is indifferent high, and full of trees, which make the easternmost point as we entered Grande, from whence it runs in west and northerly about 4 leagues. There is no such bay to the eastward as Rio Janeiro between that and Cape Frio. This is a certain mark not to miss Grande, which might easily be done by a stranger, the latitude being near the same for 40 leagues within Cape Frio, but Grande lies out near 2 points farther southerly, as you come to it from the eastward, than any other land between that and Cape Frio. We kept but an indifferent account of the Ship's way from Cape Frio, being nothing but fluttering Weather, but the Portuguese Master told me it is not less than 34 Leagues. We kept continual Soundings, and had always ground from 1 League to 10 off the shore, from 20 to 50 fathom Water. Very even and gradual Soundings with soft blue clayish Sand, till we got the length of Grande, then we had harder Ground mix'd with small Stones and red Sand. The shore runs hither nearest west. The Island Grande is remarkable high Land, with a small Notch, and a Tip standing up on one side in the middle of the highest Land, easy to be seen if clear. And there's a small Island to the southward without it, which rises in 3 little Hummocks. The nearest Hummock to the Island Grande is the least. As we came in and out, we saw it, and it appears alike on both sides. There is also a remarkable round white Rock that lies on the larboard side nearest to Grande, between it and the main at the entrance going in. On the starboard side there are several Islands, and the main is much like Islands till you get well in. The best way, when you open the Coves that are inhabited on the starboard side going in, is to get a Pilot to carry you to the watering Cove within Grande. Otherwise send in a Boat to the Freshwater Cove, which lies round the inner westermost point of the Island, and near a League in. The passage is between small Islands, but room enough and bold. It's the second Cove under the first high mount and round, behind the first point you see when you are in between the 2 Islands. This is the Cove where we water'd. There are 2 other Coves very good, with some shoal banks between them, but no shoal ground before we come to this Cove. We sounded all the passage in, and seldom found less than 10 fathom water, but had not time to know or sound the rest of the Coves. The town bears northeast about 3 leagues distant from this Cove. The Island of Grande is near about 9 leagues long high Land, and so is the main within it. All you see near the water side is thick covered with wood. The Island abounds with monkeys and other wild beasts, has plenty of good timber, firewood, and excellent water, with oranges and lemons and guavas growing wild in the woods. The necessaries we got from the town were rum, sugar, and tobacco, which they sell very dear, though not good to smoke, 'tis so very strong. We had also fowls and hogs, but the latter are scarce. Beef and mutton are cheap, but no great quantity to be had. Indian corn, bananas, plantains, guavas, lemons, oranges, and pineapples they abound with, but have no bread except cassado, the same sort as is eaten in our West Indies, which they call farina de pau, i.e. bread of wood. They have no kind of sallating. We had fine pleasant weather most of the time we were here, but hot like an oven, the sun being right over us. The winds we did not much observe, because they were little and veerable, but commonly between north and the east. We clear'd an ordinary Portuguese here, called Emmanuel de Santo, and shipp'd another, whose name was Emmanuel Gonsalves.